So let's go ahead and get started. End of year three has several key data collections, and by file type, it's the largest data collection in CALPADS. In general, the data in end of year three is collected to satisfy the requirements of the Every Student Succeeds Act, or ESSA, the Individuals with Disabilities in Education Act, or IDEA, and end of year three has data that informs several of the California School Dashboard indicators and other state level accountability mechanisms. The files that are used to submit this data are first your student incident or SINC, your student incident results or SIRS, and your student offense or SOF files. So these are your three incident files together, the SINC, SIRS, and SOF. And together they provide counts of suspensions, expulsions, and offenses to determine persistently dangerous schools. And they provide discipline information for students with disabilities that is required by IDEA. They also provide behavioral incidents that involve restraint or seclusion. So those are the SINC, SIRS, and SOF records. Next, we have the student absence summary or STAS file type. The data from the STAS file is used as a dashboard state indicator that's required by ESSA and by LCFF statute, and that is the chronic absenteeism indicator. So chronic absenteeism is determined by comparing student absenteeism to your cohort reports, another instance of cohort influencing the dashboard. Next is the SENR file, and we use the SENR file for a couple of different purposes in end of year three. So the first purpose is to determine cumulative enrollment. So the counts for cumulative enrollment is based or is used as the denominator again in suspensions, expulsions, and absenteeism rates, and we get the counts of cumulative enrollment from the SENR record. And next is graduate and completer information. So a count of students who graduated or were completers in the current academic year are provided through SENR records. It should be noted, though, that early grads and late grads may not be included in your four-year cohort reports, which also have graduated and completer information. Next, we have the homeless program or SPRG records, your 191 SPRG records. These provide counts of students who were unhoused during the academic year. And then finally, we have the RFEP SELA records, the Student English Language Acquisition records. And this provides information on English learner students who were reclassified during the academic year, students who took the summative LPAC and tested as or reclassified fluent. This data collection will impact nearly every aspect of your LEA. So it's important to receive timely and accurate data, especially if you're data stewards, your department level subject matter experts, the data sources, various locations in your LEAs, especially if they are not 12-month employees. It's very important to reach out to discuss the end of year three submission now, because there's a lot of work involved. And if they are not 12-month employees, we'll need to want to get that work done as early as possible and as much of it done prior to summer break. We do have a list of staff involved in the end of year three submission, but again, this data submission impacts nearly every aspect of your LEA. So this may not be a thorough list for you, and I would invite you to reach out to other folks if you determine that they become relevant to the data that's submitted in end of year three. But our recommendation here is for school site administrators, district administrators, English learner coordinators, special education staff, attendance clerks and attendance supervisors, as well as NPS school staff, all have involvement in the end of year three data submission. So quite a few folks already recommended, but you may need even more than that. So this slide contains your end of year three pre-snapshot, pre-May 6th submission activities. So student enrollment or SENR data that is submitted throughout the year is used again to calculate cumulative enrollment. However, student exit information is required to certify end of year three. So end of year three is when you'll provide your exit and completer codes, and every student will require an SENR record to close the academic year enrollment, but do not close the academic year enrollment until after the testing window finishes. We'll need those students to be enrolled in order to report the results of testing. And so we'll need the testing window to be finished prior to closing the SENR records for your students. Students who are RFEP during the academic year are reported in CALPADS at end of year 3. And those who are RFEP'd over the summer must have their status date, their RFEP status start date, correspond with a period that they were enrolled at your LEA. So you may need to do some interesting calculations with the RFEP start date for your summer RFEP students. Homeless student program records submitted at any time during the school year are counted in end of year 3, so there is no need to wait to submit your SPRG records. You can submit your SPRG records. These are going to be your SPRG records that use a program code of 191 for the homeless program, and there's no need to wait until May 6th to submit these records. These should be submitted and updated as earlier as frequently as possible or as deemed necessary locally, so that students experiencing houselessness are receiving services associated with that program. As the slide title indicates here, these are more pre-snapshot or pre-May 6th submission activities that should be occurring locally here. And these ones involve the incident records, so the SYNC-SIRS and SOF. Incidents do occur throughout the academic year, and incident records can be submitted continuously in CALPADS. The 3 files, the SYNC-SIRS and SOF, all use replacement processing, such that the updates to these files can be made in one of 2 ways. First, you can submit the files containing all of your incident data throughout the academic year, updating the entirety via operational keys, and these are the operational keys in this column here for your incident records. Or second, updates can be made to your incident data in CALPADS by only extracting new incidents that contain previously unreported incident IDs. But this second option depends on your expertise and your student information system functionality. At the very least, an early submission of these 3 file types will allow you to spot potential errors and inconsistencies in reporting, as long as you understand the relationship and the necessity of all 3 of the incident files. So there is a common pain point experienced in end of year 3. There may be several, but this is the most common occurring pain point in end of year 3, and it revolves around incident reporting for NPS schools, and it revolves around the question, are LEAs required to submit data, incident data for students at NPS schools? And the answer is yes. LEAs are required to submit incident data that occurred at NPS schools. LEAs need to work with the NPS schools to collect and report data that reflects the time that the students attended the NPS school during the academic year. LEAs and NPS schools must have policies and procedures in place to identify, document, and report incidents involving restraint and seclusion and incidents involving students with disabilities. LEAs have the burden of submission, therefore, LEAs must facilitate the data collection and verify the completeness of the data prior to submission in CALPADS. So reach out in collaboration with your NPS folks, as well as with your special education coordinators, to collect incident data for NPS schools. An early introduction will allow you to proactively instruct them on the required data elements and to set a timeline for retrieval and for submission. And to help with the NPS incident submission, we do have a recording on NPS student discipline. It's a guide on the CSIS YouTube training channel, as well as in an Excel document. And we've placed both of those in the notes section of this slide with live links for you to access those resources for guidance on reporting NPS incident data. All right, let's talk about restraint and seclusion in the incident submission in end of year 3 now. So the data that's certified in the 24 to 25 end of year 3 submission, that is the submission that opens on May 6th, this end of year 3. The data that's certified at end of year 3 will be used to make monitoring determinations in the 2026 monitoring school year. So, as a result of a settlement, the court has mandated that the Special Education Division at the CDE use certified restraint and seclusion data as an additional data point in making its annual monitoring determinations. So, LEAs who report more than 2 restraints and seclusions per pupil, that's more than a 2-to-1 ratio of restraint and seclusion to pupil, will be asked to perform student record reviews. LEAs that report 0 incidents of restraint or seclusion and have greater than 100 students with disabilities, or LEAs that report 0 incidents of restraint or seclusion and have greater than 100 students with disabilities enrolled at NPS schools, or LEAs that fail to certify the CALPADS end of year 3 submission will be flagged as questionable for data quality and will have to complete monitoring activities associated with data quality. So that is occurring this academic year, and so it is should put it on your mind to be very, very aware of the restraint and seclusion data that you're submitting in your incident files, and ensure that you're working with the proper subject matter experts for incident data on verifying accuracy prior to certification. So that is incident reporting. Let's now discuss a little bit on the homeless program reporting that's done in end of year 3 in CALPADS. So LEAs must administer a housing questionnaire to all students annually in order to ensure the identification of children and youths who are experiencing homelessness. CALPADS administrators should coordinate with their local homeless liaisons to identify and accurately reflect the current situation for any student who may have become homeless. For any student who has become homeless, LEAs should submit SPRG records that reflect an education program code of 191, homeless program, using the date that the student became homeless as the program start date. Homeless students qualify for Title I services and funding, LCFF funding, free lunch under the National School Lunch Program, and Sunbucks summer EBT benefits. So it's important to support your homeless liaisons by providing training and guidance to school personnel, such as principals, counselors, teachers, and enrollment staff, meal services, and transportation personnel. CalPADS administrators should coordinate with their local homeless liaisons to identify students who may have become homeless. For any student who has become homeless, LEAs should report SPRG 191 records. And it's important that you update CalPADS as frequently as possible in order to help your county and state liaisons to better plan and provide support to districts experiencing significant increases in homeless student enrollment. And we have placed a link to CalPADS Flash number 295 related to the Southern California wildfires and reporting of homeless program records in CalPADS. And we've linked to that in the notes section of this slide for your reference if you did download the slide deck. All right, moving now from discussing homeless program records to discussing long-term English learners or LTELs. So LTEL students are generally defined as an English learner student who has not achieved English language proficiency within a specified number of years and has not yet been reclassified as RFEP. But the CDE uses 2 distinct definitions for LTEL students. The 2 definitions encompass different grade levels, different start dates, and different proficiency criteria. Because the LTEL definition for the dashboard differs from the one used for Data Quest and CASP and LPAC assessments, the LTEL counts will also not align between the dashboard, Data Quest, and CASP and LPAC assessments. LEAs should only rely on Data Quest LTEL data as a proxy for the LTELs that will be used on the California School Dashboard. ODS Report 8.1 Student Profile List would be the best report to run to identify potential LTELs until your end of year revisions begin processing. Running Report 8.1 with a current as of date can allow you to filter for English learner students and English learner status dates, as well as initial U.S. school enrollment dates. And this can help to identify students who are eligible or near eligible for reclassification. So that is just a bit about the LTELs and the different definitions of LTELs. Let's spend a slide here discussing RFEP students specifically. So it's recommended that LEAs update RFEP statuses in CALPADS by May 15th, 2025. LEAs are further encouraged to review the status of their English learners and make reclassification decisions soon as students meet reclassification criteria required by Education Code. The 24 to 25 summative LPAC and summative alternate LPAC ends on May 31st. So students will no longer be able to use the 24 to 25 results for reclassification after May 31st, 2025. For students who may have reclassified based on their 24 to 25 summative LPAC or alternate LPAC scores, we recommend testing them no later than May 15th, as this will ensure that all eligible students are tested as required by law and that is reflected in CALPADS. So NLEA should ensure that students transferring have updated records in CALPADS within 10 days of the transfer. And again, we have placed a flash for your reference in the notes section of this slide with flash 277, which is a flash on reclassifying and reporting RFEP students during the summer when students are not enrolled. And so if you do end up in a precarious situation where you're past May 15th or even more precarious past May 31st, please do look at flash 277 for guidance. And again, it's contained in the notes section of this slide. Okay, that concludes our discussion of the individual file types that are submitted in end of year 3. Let's now turn to our end of year 3 reports. And again, there are quite a few of them. End of year 3 contains 11 aggregate reports, and end of year 3 contains several supporting reports. These reports provide counts and lists for cumulative enrollment, graduates and completers, RFEP students, homeless students, student absenteeism, and incident data. To understand and interpret your reports, we strongly suggest that you turn to the report mapping guides in the CALPADS user manual for end of year 3. The report mapping guides provide data elements used in the counts for your aggregate reports and will assist with your data stewards and subject matter experts reports review and verification by again identifying the sources of the data that should be consulted for accuracy. And we have placed a link to the end of year 3 report mapping guides again in the notes section of this slide in the slide deck. Okay, your incident data in end of year 3 is a critical piece of the end of year 3 data collection. We know that the data is used as a state indicator with your suspension rate, and it is highly scrutinized. The CDE State Superintendent of Public Instruction, Tony Thurmond, has released letters regarding state guidance for new laws on discipline, and more recently, reducing disproportionate discipline in schools. The early submission of incident data allows for the analysis of discipline data and an estimation of your suspension rate. But there is not a report in CALPADS that calculates your suspension rate. But a familiarity with the CALPADS report mapping guides can help you to identify and count suspensions and expulsions using incident report codes on report 7.12. So report 7.12 can be used to help you to estimate your suspension rates, although it does not actually provide the suspension rate on the report itself. It should be noted that while this report may provide the most complete and pertinent incident information, it is not an aggregate report, and so it's often overlooked simply because it's not required to be reviewed in order to certify. It isn't an aggregate report, so it doesn't need to have the green check on it in CALPADS in order for you to certify, and so LEAs sometimes don't review it. But 7.12 really is the best report to review if you're interested in determining what your suspension rate indicator will look like on the California School dashboard. All right, so again, we have links to relevant trainings, guidance material, and documentation for end of year 3 on this slide. And again, these are live links. So with the CALPADS user manual, we have linked the pages for each of the files that are submitted in end of year 3 with the student absence summary, the 3 incident file types, the CELA records for RFEP students, your program records for your homeless program or your homeless students, and your SENR or student enrollment records. We also have information from the CDE. These are CDE web pages. So here's the relevant FAQ for end of year 3, Flash 295 for homeless program reporting, and Flash 277 for RFEP reporting. And again, we've linked the guidance for reporting incident data for NPS schools. We've also got a couple links for the CSIS YouTube training channel for our data population and reporting and certification trainings. The data population trainings will be file type specific. So in end of year 3, we will provide data population for the sync stars and SOF, data population for the student absence summary or the STAS, data population for student programs for the homeless program, and so on. End of year reporting and certification is submission specific. So at end of year, we will have an end of year 1 reporting and certification, an end of year 3 reporting and certification, and so on. But they are file specific for data population, and they are submission specific for reporting and certification. All right, and that does conclude our discussion of end of year 3.
You have completed this module. Please continue to the next video. Thank you.